Hello, welcome to our daily loop video. We've only got 2 days left. Hopefully, we went to start playing these youth matches yesterday, but we just didn't get the time, unfortunately, because I wanted to record them, because I figured they are playing a different tactic and we are setting it up, so it would be interesting to at least record the first ones, and if they maintain interesting, to record all of them. But yeah, so hopefully maybe today we'll get a chance, because yeah, it's going to be difficult to get all 8 done. But anyway, for now it's just the daily loop. So the first thing we do is we check any transfer bids we've received. 246k, I think he is the backup. Yeah. He is the backup keeper, and the thing is, this keeper was basically a mistake, just on the base of wages too high and the timeline and stuff. But now it's a mistake to probably sell him. Like, we probably should be, probably should be waiting to get a transfer bid for him, or if we happen to snag a really good keeper on low wages and whatnot. But basically, if we do, the thing is, when we get the transfer bid, which I suppose eventually we will at some point, but we don't know when that'll be, pretty much we kind of have to take it on the day, because it'll be whatever it is. But let's just say it comes in at 1.6 million again. Same, like, we're talking about 400,000 difference. So for us, that's enough to care. What I'm saying in a roundabout way is that, as in, when we get the bid, we basically just, if we want to sell this guy when we get the bid, we just have to sell him that day, which means that we won't have him if we do that, and we will need to use some other keeper. And at the moment, it will be this guy that we've got the bid for. And whilst he's not perfect, he's okay. Like, we could run with this guy, and this is part of the reason why it was a mistake to sign this other keeper. Like, realistically, we probably could just run with this guy for all of next season, all of this season, all of next season, possibly even all of the season after. There's no real rush to move away from this guy. So I think on that basis, we're just not going to sell him. Because we're sort of happy for him to be out. One, we're totally happy for this guy to be our backup keeper, and two, he may end up being our starting keeper again for an interim period between when we sell our current one and when we find another one. Because as long as we have this other guy here paying these wages and costing all this money, like, it makes it even harder to be able to effectively justify picking up like another keeper. Like, we'll end up with basically 3 keepers we're happy to start. Yeah, we could sell this guy to be 2, but it's just we just can't have too much resources tied up into goalkeepers, basically. So it's really hard to buy another keeper. So anyway, so I don't think we're going to accept this bid for now. For some reason, that I can't think of much. To be honest, the main reason, I suppose, is if we buy another keeper. If we do buy another keeper who does, which, like I'm saying, is unlikely, but if we, for whatever reason, there's just one we can't possibly pass up on, then maybe we do sell this guy now. But because this is going back to the other thing here, like, this guy's on the minimum wages, so it's like perfect for our backup players, some of our backup rotational players, especially our backup keeper. It's kind of awesome if he's just on minimum wages for us, and the fact that he's sort of like certainly usable as a backup, and he's sort of great. So, all right, scouted players now. We'll sort by position again. Let's find that a little easier, and we'll start with the keepers. So we'll find out. If there is, I think this guy for us, like, just because we give up quite a lot of shots from like either long or from wide angles, like, that are all kind of typically quite savable. And on that basis, like, we just want them saving them all. So for us, the shot stopping is super important. So reason why, for example, the shot, because it kind of sounds obvious when I'm saying it like this, but to flip it around, if all of the opposite here was true, so we weren't giving up a lot of long shots and we weren't giving up wide angle shots, what we were giving up is shots sort of directly through the center a lot, where they're coming through straight in front with like one-on-ones on the keeper and things like that. If we were giving up a lot of those type of chances, then the shot stopping just dips a lot in regards to priority. All of a sudden, like the one-on-ones becomes way more important. The handling generally gets extra value because when they do come through and they make the save, like when it's a one-on-one like that, if they make the save and they don't catch it, often that just results in a goal anyway, because it's parried and then the striker will run on and just tap it in. So the handling gets a premium. The one-on-ones gets a premium. The rushing out gets a premium. The speed to be able to rush out and rush up for those one-on-ones, I would say not as much of a premium as these skills, but it matters more. Probably a little more for us. It matters as well for different reasons. I think generally speaking though, like whatever your keeper's doing, like speed is nowhere near as important for keepers as outfield players, but I don't think there's any circumstances where you're not always happy that your keeper can generally just move about faster. That's just generally quite useful. But yeah, I think in particular though, like, it is alright for if they're going to be rushing out and rushing up, like going. So the difference here for the rushing out on the one-on-ones, so this is specifically in regards to one-on-ones, where a player on the other team has got possession of the ball running through, and the rushing out is more about like when players don't have possession of the ball and they're rushing up to grab the ball. So sometimes, for example, you might have your keepers sort of what feels like they're just standing there. Why don't they just running at the ball? This is the attribute that you want them to have higher, and then that'll be less of a thing. So for example, for us, shot stopping is the most important thing, is what I'm saying. But if the chances that we were conceding were these ones just coming straight through the center, then this would not be as important as the handling. The handling would be more important than the shot stopping, and the one-on-ones would probably be more important, as would the rushing out. And the strength would be pretty important for them as well, because a lot of what they're doing would be under pressure, where like potentially they can grab the ball first, or a striker could sort of win the header or whatever. Like they're dueling, contesting, rushing out, whatever. The strength becomes more important because of those sort of one-on-one situations that are more likely to happen. For our keeper, they don't happen very often. They're just sort of, the shots are coming from long range and from like effectively wide range or whatever. So they're not really typically like directly competing with players. So different priorities. We said we'd do a video anyway, specifically on this. But basically, this keeper for some specific type of teams is actually pretty good. He's alright, but it's just not good for us because of the low shot stopping. To be fair though, like even if you are conceding the chances through the middle or whatever, like clearly the shot stopping still matters. That's the thing. It just doesn't matter as much as these other things which are higher. So potentially it's he's not. I think also it's the low rushing out which makes him a little bit, the low shot stopping, low rushing out. Not great, because it probably eliminates this guy from most systems to want him as a keeper. And then also he's got the low command of area and the low organisation, so he's also weak on the set pieces. So anyway, we're not going to get him because he's not good for us, but I'm just saying for specific teams he might be okay. You need to bear in mind he's young and he's also got an 82 ceiling. That's a big deal here. So if we go to him, likely I'm saying these training options will be uppity up. So you got to also bear in mind that there's a lot of scope for growth for this keeper going forwards as well, which would kind of be like, it is a thing. If we're in a lower division, we, realistically, like even we could start this guy. He's not the kind of keeper we're looking for at all, but he'd be alright. Certainly, and we could develop him up a lot. But I think if we were playing a different system and we cared more about the one-on-ones, then maybe. But I think for us, no. And we don't need a keeper either. But he's a good wage for what we're looking for. He does tick boxes potentially for some team, I guess is what I'm saying here. That high ceiling, though, as well, it's just the fact that he's got so much scope for growth is kind of a big deal as well. Right, next keeper. So for us, this guy's better than the first guy. He's worse overall, and generically speaking, but what we actually care about is his shot stopping. To be honest, we probably and he's a massive upgrade on our youth team keeper. Like I said, the speed is generically useful. So the fact that that's low is not great. The handling being low, we could be alright with that because the shots are typically long. So as long as he saves it and parries it decently and recovers decently enough, then it's probably fine. So this guy's probably fine for us. But again, like, we don't really want another keeper at this juncture. Basically, to buy this guy, we'd have to sell our other keeper now and just, accept the £400,000 less than we otherwise would get. And the bid may even come in at higher because he has improved a bit. So it might be more like 500,000. And we just if he's got no the thing is he's probably not as good as this guy either. At the moment, he probably would be in a couple seasons' time, but at the moment he's pretty similar. So he's not actually an upgrade on the this guy. So the thing is, the money matters for us. If we were sort of swimming in cash, we'd happily pay the 1.1 million to just get him for our youth team and to just develop him up a bit. But yeah, just need to bear in mind though, this is 77 ceiling versus 82, and the fact that this guy's 3 years older and still is maintaining that much higher ceiling. Like this first one, this keeper has massive scope for improvement, and he's already pretty decent. Whereas this guy obviously still has significant scope, but just the other guy's massive scope for improvement. If we check out his training options, he's not going to get more composure, but he gets a pretty decent across the board sort of growth here, whatever option we went with. But I think we're just not going to get him because we don't have the money. I mean, if we go to our youth squad, for example, and we click on this guy, like clearly he's way better than this guy for us. This guy is actually pretty bad, to be honest, because his shot stopping is not great, but his parrying is also horrible. His handling, so basically, the low handling, low parrying, that's bad. The fact the agility is high, we say these things work as like a. If you look at these 3 attributes as a trio, if one of them is high, it's not a disaster. But if all 3 of them are low, it's like a disaster. So the fact that the agility is high, we talked about this multiple times. I'm not going to cover it again. But basically what I'm saying is, and he's really slow as well, and he's got bad shot stopping combined with bad shot positioning, which is bad. Like, there's a lot of bad things about this guy. Plus, on top of all of this, he's 22 next season anyway, so he's not going to be our youth keeper next season. But I think at this point, we just have to... I think we just can't tie up this amount of money in a keeper that's only for our youth team. If it was a keeper that was for both our youth and senior team, then maybe. But I think the path for the youth keeper at the moment for us is probably just trying to... we don't know if we're going to get one from an academy trial. Let's move on for now. We may end up coming back and buying this dude, but I just don't see it, to be honest. He's just... For all of the bright spots here, he's not perfect in various ways. Like, the handling, ideally, that's pretty low. Like I said, it's alright for us. We could survive it, but just saying, I think the command of area and organisation, whilst not extremely low, like, we do have a bit of a problem dealing with set pieces, so ideally our keeper would have them higher. It is something we could get up over time with the training options. The speed is, like, again, it doesn't really matter that it's that low. Like, if all these other things were high, we definitely... But again, it's just a factor. And our keeper does have a little bit to do, so that durability of that, it doesn't necessarily have to be high for us, but that low might end up being a thing as well. And then also he's going to play tons of youth matches, and we would be able to develop him quite a bit. So the low this determination would ideally be higher. It's not particularly low. There's just a lot of things that, like, if some of these things were high, we might be much more tempted for this guy, but they're not. Or if, for example, he was way cheaper. If he was just a few £100,000, we probably would just buy him, by the way. Right, next keeper. We were totally happy to play this guy, fine, but we're not going to pay this much money and wages for him, so let's move on. Probably fine, but we don't need a left back, and probably better than the current left back we got, but we're not going to spend the money or whatever. So moving on. Too much for us to spend. Too much wages. Not high enough tackling for us. Maybe, but I think just not quite there. I think he's similarly useful to us to the 19-year-old centre-half that we bought the other day. So if, you know, like maybe he's a little bit better, but he's in the ballpark of that player. And at 24, you know, there's quite a big age difference. So I think not. To be clear though, like we have bought some centre-halves already. This guy, he's a top of one. Like if he was in our starting squad, we'd just happily keep him around for pretty much ever on the minimum, like until he needs a contract extension on those minimum wages. Because with minimum wages, like it'd be totally awesome to have a player of this quality, but you know it's not. It's 300k. So right, next guy, yeah, like there's stuff here, but 4.3 million. Yeah, I was gonna say like he's sort of alright in various ways, but there's stuff here to work with. He would definitely start if we had him in our youth team, but we're not going to pay 4.3 million. Just not good enough. We just get a graduate already. You can see in our current pool that we're already going to have players graduating better than this guy. Yeah, just not good enough. Not good enough. Again, like if he was in our starting squad, we probably, you know, just have him around because he's just be awesome. Good luck. He's a bit slow, whatever, but he's got enough here, like to work with clearly. If he had minimum wages, we'd just be keeping him around. But again, 900k is like 30 times the minimum wage. It's just a huge difference. This guy just not quite good enough. Not good enough tackling. Right back, don't need it. Left wing back, don't need it. Don't need it. Don't need it. DMC. Again, if he was in our starting squad, yet another one we'd just happily keep around because he's just kind of awesome, to be honest. But we're not going to pay these type of wages for him. He's not on our timeline, a bit old, but yeah, with the minimum wages, we'd keep him. Don't use right wing back. Don't use right wing back. Don't use right wing back, but yeah, same sort of situation. If he was in our starting squad, and he played a different position or whatever, he's sort of pretty decently rounded or whatever. But yeah, he's not. We do need a left midfielder, another one. We've got a couple here to look at. So I think this guy. Not quite good enough, I think. There's stuff to work with here. If we wanted to play the same formation as the youth team, we would need a left midfielder. He's certainly not like good enough for the senior team without improving. For the youth team, he could be alright, but we would be getting him with the intention to develop him up a bit. So then the determination matters because he will be playing all the time. And ideally, the ceiling would just be higher. Because he's kind of behind where he needs to be. So we want to be confident that he could catch that up. So I think between the low determination and the ceiling, that it's not low, but it's not high. I think for the age, I think it's above average. It's just not really high, if you know what I mean. So, and because he's behind where we would want him to be, we would need to be tempted by that. So I think we're going to pass. Plus, unfortunately, he's not probably quite where we would want him to be the backup for this first team either. I think the guy we currently got is the guy that ideally would be the backup, and we need a big improvement on that. So this guy is clearly better, but again, like way more wages. The thing is, the reason why this guy is way better than this guy, but the wages are so different. And this guy is kind of like an investment as such. If we're going to be playing him a lot, developing him up with these low wages, we can kind of be confident that like after a few seasons, plus his contract will be for like 6 seasons, maybe 7. So we'd have him for way more time as well. So I think, and this guy, it would only be this season and 2 more. It's a totally different, like clearly this guy is better than this guy, but it's just so many other factors that matter here. But I think all in all, this guy just isn't quite there. That's what it comes down to. Like, he's not that much better. He is better, but he's not that much better than what we could potentially get, well, one of our graduates. So we could potentially have a 16-year-old that is only slightly kind of behind where this guy is at, if we're lucky. And by the time that our 16-year-old guy is 19, he could be way better than this. So, I mean, of course, this is the thing, though. Like, there's only, at the end of the day, like, we do have to actually get these graduates, and we do actually have to wait for them to progress. And that's a factor here as well, because we don't even have them yet, and then it's going to be 3 months after that from when they're 16 to 19. So we're basically talking 4 months in the future, which is a long time as well. So we need to bear that in mind. So I think we pass on that guy as well. And this guy, we pass on. But again, this is yet another one that if we happen to have this type of player in our starting squad on the minimum wages, I think he's too good for that, so that wouldn't happen. But just, again, by example, it's just the type of player that if you get... he's way too well-rounded for that, so he's too good for that generally. But just conceptually, just to really ram the point home, like, if you do get any of these players in your starting squad that are generic, just generally useful going forwards, it's definitely worth thinking about holding on to them. At least until you've definitely bought other players and you know that you're never going to play them. So, right, moving on. MCs. Try and be faster through these because we got really specific requirements for MCs, so it makes it easy to cruise through them. So we've basically got two things here. A box-to-box midfielder who needs a whole bunch of things, but inclusive of tackling and passing, but a whole bunch of other stuff. And then we've got our attacking midfielder MC, and the main things we care about that is we need them to have long shots, passing, and vision. So basically this guy, he could potentially be that, but I don't think the passing is quite there. This guy... neither. He can't be the AMC and the box-to-box. Potentially he could be, but he's just short in lots of things to what he... Ideally, the finishing will be higher. Our box-to-box midfielder does end up with a lot of chances in the box. I've been paying close attention, more so than the long shots, actually. So the finishing is more important than the long shots, I believe, for this player for us. He's got other positives. He's super fast, which is kind of awesome, and good in the air, so he could get up and back faster. But again, I think this speed combined with the role that we need, combined with the endurance and natural fitness, means he would tire and need to be subbed. But all in all, the main reason why this guy, we kind of just know that we can kind of instantly dismiss him to some degree is because the passing just isn't high enough. And based on how low it is, if we were to consider him, it would be because the tackling's like 70 or something, right? Like... it'd be because something is huge, other things are huge, and other things are generally not that huge. But yeah, it's interesting. I think this is another example of a player that if he was in our starting squad on the minimum wage, we'd definitely be happy to keep him around as the backup. Right, next player doesn't have the stuff. Tackling too low for the box-to-box. Long shots too low for the attacking one. Long shots, again, just too low on everything. I think if we the quickest thing we can do pretty much is just look at the long shots and tackling. One of those two has to be high, and if that isn't the case, then we can almost dismiss everything else. This guy could possibly be the box-to-box midfielder, looking at him. He's a bit slow for that, ideally. Endurance and natural fitness, a bit low. And the work rate's too low. I think the low speed combined with the low work rate is really bad for that role, because not only are they generally moving slow, but they're also then even moving slower than slow a lot of the time to get up and back. So I think that as a combination eliminates him. And then I think also just at this price, we're not going to pay that kind of money for a player that is, unless they're sort of ticking more boxes, I suppose. Right, this guy, tackling not there for the box-to-box, long shots not there for the other role. Long shots tackling situation again, tackling too low, long shots not high enough for the low tackling, too low. I think for our attacking midfielder, the long shots is there, at least at this age, but the passing and the vision combined is not quite high enough. And then I think for the box-to-box, it's just too slow and too low work rate issue again. Right, so no MCs. We've got quite a bit to look through, but nothing there, unfortunately, for us. The MRs, we're still running our starting squad MR. It is something that is a little bit easy, I think, for us to find, hopefully. But yeah, we still got requirements. I think this guy just not quite there. I think we can get a graduate that's basically better than this. It's the same situation again. Certainly not good enough for our senior team at the moment. So I think this guy is an improvement. Is he good enough for what we need? So we know we played a lot of matches, and this role is very defined for us. So we know, for example, that he runs up the wing with the ball a lot. And that is probably the most important thing. Now, there's other things that he does, which we'll cover. The other things that he does is he does get involved in link-up play. So the passing matters a bit. But they're typically pretty short passes. And I think our current... let's look at our current right midfielders. So our current right midfielder definitely is got enough passing that it's not an issue at all. But his passing is actually quite high, so that's not surprising. The other thing is that he moves up the wing with the ball a lot, and ideally he does get tackled quite a bit. Ideally he would get tackled less, basically, because he gets a lot of chances to move up the wing with the ball. So ideally, for example, he would basically have high speed, high strength, high dribbling. The other thing is he does get quite a few chances to cross it, and his crossing is low. He does have a lot of space for himself, so even though he is attacking midfielder, it's got a lot of a lot of space around him, so he does end up attempting tackles a little bit. So that's a secondary thing that we ideally would have a bit. Well, that's really low, so ideally he does attempt them, so anything higher, I guess, is good. People do try to tackle him quite a lot, so again, the flair ideally would be higher. We do end up having to substitute him off quite a bit because he gets tired, so ideally the endurance and natural fitness will be higher. I'm not sure that his movement matters too much, to be honest, because he's normally picking the ball up like deep and then sort of going forwards with it. So, and he does get the odd chances, never long shots, so that doesn't particularly matter. We just got too many players across the middle in our tactic, and he's out on the right, so he never really gets them. He does get the odd chance though, so the finishing matters, and the composure matters a little bit for those chances, but typically, but not always, they are wider angled shots, obviously, because out on the right wing. So typically, it's the accuracy that's the issue. So yeah, it's not a huge deal because we don't really need, like, he does get a few shots or whatever, but that's not really what really we need from this player. So right, so let's go back and look at the one in the scouting pool and try and remember all of that. So I think he's faster, stronger, higher dribbling, crossing not high, but higher crossing than the other guy. The flair is about the same, I think, so that isn't higher. And that was the main stuff. The other stuff, we did care a bit about the passing, which is lower. That could be an issue, because the other one's certainly high enough, but he was like 65, so that's significant. I think the tackling for both of them was really, really low, but ideally it would be a bit higher. They said the long shots doesn't particularly matter, which is a shame because it is high. And the finishing ideally would be higher, but this is actually lower, and his composure is lower. So he's certainly not perfect, but we're never going to get someone that is perfect that has all of these things. So we've got to bear that in mind. And I think as far as the primary function of this role is concerned, which is just to advance the ball up the wing. Oh, and we said the endurance and natural fitness, he does get tired and sub off a lot, and this guy's way higher. and not having to sub him off is a pretty cool thing. So I think combined with the fact that this guy is in the ballpark of the wages, we're generally looking around 250k, ideally, around that type of number. So he's in the ballpark of that, so that's good. And then also he's pretty cheap by price. And then I suppose also for a 23-year-old, we can sort by 23-year-olds here to get a bit of a feel. We've only got two. The other guy's more. If we go to the... so this guy's ceiling is 62. It's not great, but it's also not... I don't think... If we go to the auctions, 23-year-olds, it is low compared to these guys. 66, 65. So these are the sort of the real top end. So there's a couple 65. So he's like a bit lower than the lower end of the top end. I say a little bit more than a bit, but not too drastically far off. So I think the takeaway from that is that it's he definitely has scope to improve, but he is a notch behind the best of the best in regards to the ceiling. So and then the other thing we can do is we can look at this boost coming up. And a lot of these are zeros, so we have to bear in mind that potentially the natural fitness ain't improving, the determination ain't going to improve, the flare ain't going to improve, and the crossing ain't going to improve. Can we live with that? Maybe. I think the endurance going up is kind of cool. It means we'll never have to sub him off, and the finishing will go up a bit, so he does get the odd chance. I mean, it's still low, the movement. So this boost in particular, there's not much coming. But this is not necessarily a bad thing, by the way, because we're saying there is quite a bit of scope for growth for this guy, and we know that quite possibly the natural fitness, the determination, the flare, and the crossing are all potentially, reach the ceiling of those attributes. So, and the fact that he's got quite a bit of growth still between his current average of attributes and the ceiling of the average of attributes, we can therefore infer that we already knew anyway that when it's this much difference, that quite a few of his attributes would have already reached their ceiling. So the fact that we know that this is what some of them are is not necessarily a bad thing, because it means that from all of the rest of the attributes that aren't on this list, there's less chance that those ones will be the ones that have reached their ceiling. So in other words, if we care about, for example, speed, or which we do, or dribbling, which we do, or ideally the passing we get up and whatever, so we know what we care about, they're not on this list. And the fact that these ones are maxed out, and we know that effectively a certain amount of them are likely to be maxed out because of this, this is a good thing, arguably. Not the crossing so much, but the other ones are kind of arguably just a good thing. Like, we would happily have these ones maxed out, so to speak. Less the crossing, by the way. We would have liked that to be more. But it now might mean that, for example, the aerial ability can get higher, the strength can get higher, the speed can get higher, the tackling, passing, whatever. The other ones that aren't on this list, basically, have a bit more chance. So that's a good thing, arguably. Save the crossing. But, we know what we're getting here. We know we're getting a player that probably won't increase much in the crossing. Just to be clear here, these is sort of all soft. They do float a bit, so it doesn't mean... And it could just be luck, by the way. It doesn't mean that these won't improve. It just means that they might not improve, pretty much. But it's not hard. It's not a hard cap, and plus it could just be bad luck. Like, it could just be the luck of the draw, so to speak, that the two options were zero. If you really want to truly infer it, like, you need to basically track over multiple seasons if both of the options were zero. And even then it can change. So it's quite soft, but the thing is, soft doesn't mean nothing. It still has meaning. And I think that meaning is kind of, whilst these things, it could just be luck, like I'm saying, but again, like, we can make a reasonable conclusion that these attributes, whilst they might still go up, they are unlikely to go up a lot, even though they might. It's just unlikely. So that information means something in and of itself, basically. I think all things considered, we are just going to buy this guy, pretty much. because he does a much better primary job as our current guy. And I think the other thing is not a huge outlay here if it doesn't work out. It's not a big amount of money. If we buy this guy and then it doesn't work out, we're basically losing £100,000, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot. Between this and the and I think, for example, as well, like there is a bit of scope to improve this guy still, and with the right boost, we can probably get his value up a bit. I mean, the thing is, that's true of nearly everyone we're buying, by the way, as long as they're younger. So it's not a huge factor here. But I think it's just we know we've gone through quite a few scouting pools, and I think as far as the right midfield and the left midfielders are concerned, like, this is easily the best one guy that we've come across. He can only play the more attacking role, though. He's not going to be able to do. We won't end up flipping the formation around and playing him in the current ML role, because he doesn't have the tackling and other stuff that we really care about, and also the ability for that player to carry the ball up the wing is not. It's still important, but it doesn't have anywhere near as much weighting as critical for this. So because this guy can do this well, you can be quite forgiving a lot of other things. I mean, this guy does get a few shots, though. That's the thing. So this low finishing is a real problem, and he is involved in the link-up play. And even though you can just say, well, okay, he'll probably just miss those chances he gets, but he does enough to still be a net positive and create chances for other players and blah, blah, blah. You can definitely make that argument. But I think the low passing, we won't truly know how big an issue this is until we play him, unfortunately. Because for all of this awesomeness, if he just does stray passes and gives the ball up in the 1-2s, bringing the ball up the wing, like, you know, it's not good. But I think we won't know that until we play him, unfortunately. But again, yeah, his finishes are just not going to be there. Even close range stuff, this low finishing and composure, he could be missing some proper sitters for us. We've got to be prepared for that frustration. But yeah, I think the primary function, he can do it well. And I think also the fact that we got to bear in mind this big-ish aerial ability, that he will be a factor on set pieces. And then, especially the attacking ones, the defensive ones a bit less so with the bad marking and tackling and stuff. But the attacking ones, sure. Again, he may miss these chances because of the low finishing composure. But I think it's it's a big positive thing, this aerial ability for set pieces. And yeah, and the fact that we basically will never have to sub him off because he's tired is kind of awesome tactically as well, that we never have to worry about that. So we will buy this guy, but we're going to just finish going through the pool first. Generally, you always want to finish going through the list, just in case there's somebody you want even more, especially somebody in the same positions. At the very least, we'd want to check the other right midfielders. Too old, too high wages. Left wing, we don't use that. Left wing, we don't use that. I think I'll just use that as the reasoning. If the player happened to be so awesome in something or other that we could put him in a different position, then I would mention it. This guy, we could get a graduate better than this. This guy, we couldn't get a graduate directly better than this, but we could certainly get one that's going to be better by the time he's 18. I think he's just super low in loads of stuff that we care about for this role, like the long shots, the dribbling, strength. This guy, just awesome, kind of awesome, but again, this just doesn't fit our timeline. Too old, too high wages. But again, if he's in our starting squad, we'd just be holding on to this guy because, like, quite frankly, this is a massive upgrade over our current AMC. This is exactly. I'm looking more and more at this guy. This is basically just everything we could ask for, everything we could reasonably ask for. We wanted super high long shots, we wanted high passing, we wanted high vision, and we wanted high finishing. They were the kind of the main things. He's got all of that. Ideally, he would be fast enough with good enough dribbling that he could get, when he gets the space, he can burst in the box and shoot. And whilst these are not high per se, they are high enough for what we need. So that's great. And then he's also a factor on set pieces, just as a bonus, which is great. He's kind of just awesome, but yeah, unfortunately doesn't fit our timeline. This guy, right wing. And then into the strikers, which are going to be hard at this point for us to pick up any because we happen to get some good ones. So yeah, not good enough. Fine. This is exactly the type of player that we probably would happily buy in the beginning, but he's just not as good as the ones that we managed to pick up. I think it's just good enough finishing and composure, good enough speed, and he's sort of very good movement. Okay, he's kind of, he's got deficiency still. not that strong, not that good in the air. But some of this stuff, like the dribbling, isn't great, but it's kind of like it's also not 6 or whatever, right? So, and the vision isn't great for Lingard, but he does have good enough passing that he could at least make a basic pass. This is kind of just like a great candidate for the poacher role. But again, it's just not as good as what we've got. This is the issue. And even then, we've got a similar sort of striker, like conceptual striker to this in regards to what this guy can only be poacher, and we've got another striker in our youth team, I think that's 19, that we've already bought that's conceptually a similar type of archetype of player. So we just pass. But yeah, this is the type of player we could be interested in if we didn't get other... this guy. Anyway, next guy... yet another one that would probably be happy to run, and another one that's certainly an example of who was in our starting squad. We'd just be happy to keep him around for ages for a backup, but he's just not. He isn't that. Basically, we'd have to pay the 400k wages, and he's not as good as what we got. And then this guy as well, another one that if he was in our starting squad on minimum wages, we probably would be happy to keep him around, but he's not. And he's old and high wages. So in all of this, it's just this guy. I think we just buy this guy. Honestly, I think I'm just going to buy him. Yeah. Talked about it a lot, but I think in the whole, just to summarize, like, it's because of low purchase price, low enough wages, enough scope to develop this guy up, and it does the main function we need him to do, has some bonus stuff like the aerial ability, and yeah, unfortunately the secondary functions, which he gets a few chances to score, he's bad at that. He's not great on the crossing, although he is an upgrade over what we've got, so that's okay. And the passing is down on the, like, he's not perfect, but yeah, I think we have been checking every day for these left and right midfielders, and really not been finding. It's pretty obvious that we're not going to get somebody who ticks all the boxes here, so it could be a long time before we come across a better player than this. And even if it, and by the time that happens, this guy could have improved as well. So we're gonna buy him. It's just too. We're just looking for really specific things as well now. So when you're asking for too many attributes on a player, like you have to be able to basically, how do you say? Like ideally, yes, the finishing will be high or whatever, and that does mean that he will get some good chances and miss them. But also, he's just going to score the odd goal off of a set piece because of that high aerial ability. So you could say, for example, that, well, yeah, the finishing might be 40 and the composure 40. These could look a lot better, even be maybe 50 or whatever. But if this aerial ability was like 16, then not only is he not a threat to score off of attacking set pieces, he's also not going to necessarily help defend them. And also, it's not just the set pieces. It's like in the run of play, there could be a high ball out wide for him to win, and he is in an advanced position where if he wins those headers, it could be, a header on to a player to score. So at the end of the day, the fact that this is higher, it does compensate for some of this other lower stuff. That's just the reality of it. The fact that this speed, strength, dribbling is at the level that it's at the end of the day, sometimes he's just going to run up with the wing with the ball when another player wouldn't, and that's going to compensate for some of this lower stuff. So I think on the balance of things, the strengths just overcome, hopefully, the weaknesses here. And the one factor that I'm genuinely the most concerned about, to be quite frank, with buying this player, is this low passing. Because at least the way that our team does play at the moment, our right midfielder does make a lot of short, simple passes in the build-up, and we don't want to lose the ball in those situations. And I'm a bit concerned that that might end up happening with this guy. But I think the only way we can know for sure is to play him, unfortunately, and we're just going to have to run that risk, I think, because we just may not find another player like this for a long time. And it is the type of player, when you're talking about getting like these types of levels towards 80 in attributes, like you just don't know that any player you ever get graduating from your academy trial will ever get to 80 something. Or towards 80 even, in an attribute. Even if they start at 60, you don't know you'll ever get it there. Whereas when you're looking at these other players and they're around like 66, 65 and things, you can kind of be confident that there's a good chance that these trialists that are graduating, that if they're starting around 50 to 60, that there is a pretty good chance you will get them to 65 in these attributes. But getting them to 80, it's not a given at all. In fact, it's quite rare, and the players that have these sort of 80 pluses or towards 80 even in attributes, they're special basically, and it's rare. So we've got to bear that in mind, that this is rare. And whilst the endurance isn't, like I'm saying, it's not necessarily, it is his highest attribute. If we could pick the highest one, we wouldn't pick that, but it is one it's not a non-factor. It isn't just the case that this guy's going to not have to sub him off because he's too tired. It's also the case that he will take longer to even get down to the yellow condition before he starts getting any penalty. So he's going to be running on basically full attributes for longer, likely longer than the opposing defenders. So he will have a window where they're a little bit tired and he's not tired at all, and he has an advantage there. There'll be another window towards the end of the game where they're really tired and he's a little bit tired, and he has an advantage there. So you also have to... This endurance at the end of the day matters because it's kind of just like bonus attribute points across the board for everything, realistically, at multiple stages in the match for this guy, which is kind of a big factor, quite frankly, when you're talking about the reason why this guy we're considering him is because of basically his ability to win one-on-one duels versus defenders, and the fact that this endurance allows him additional advantages in those situations at different stages of the match is a big deal. So anyway, hopefully I've explained enough why we're willing to go all out and spend a few £100,000 on that player. And that's a big factor there as well, by the way, is that it is only a few £100,000. So even if we're wrong and it all doesn't work out, it's not a particularly expensive mistake, which is a big factor here as well. So I think we're just going to put this guy in the team. We're going to be pretty curious to play some matches with this guy now. I think it's interesting though, because we should never have to sub him off because he's tired, but we still would want to sub him off to protect him from injury, interestingly. So we won't necessarily run the right back on the bench anymore. We might run the right midfielder still. Maybe. We'll think about that some more. It's interesting because we're kind of happy to run the backup right midfielder anyway. So it's not that big a deal for us if he does get injured. So that's anyway. So that's pretty interesting. We'll talk about that more before we play our next match. Right. So the next thing we want to do is the training options. We'll do the this guy first that we just bought. So I think bearing in mind everything we were just talking about with that, you could say the endurance is high and we wouldn't need to sub him off anyway, so we don't need to be higher. But bearing in mind what I just talked about, where when he has that condition advantage, he has basically bonus attribute points versus the players defending him. Carrying that advantage a little bit stronger is more important than having one extra point of finishing when the finishing is already really low anyway, and he's likely to miss regardless, to be honest, if he gets those chances. Right, this guy, he's our starting one. This is a real shame, to be honest, because, and it's not surprising because he's old, but he's about to become less useful in 7 days' time. So luckily we bought that guy. To be honest, even if we ended up not buying that other guy, we might have just bought him after we checked these training options, because this guy's now about to be a bit slower, and we could sort of expect that as a trend to happen next season. And if he loses even just a couple points of the speed, he's going to be noticeably worse because he's not that great at other stuff. And and then a few more next season, which could be even more than a couple, could be down. And even now it might be 3, because we have a tough decision. We're saying a 2-point swing in aerial ability, 1 less crossing. The finishing, again, is below and we don't particularly care. The long shots we don't particularly care, and the passing we do care. So I think we're going to end up going with this one just because the long shots here we don't care about. So if you eliminate that, he just never gets any, basically, so it just doesn't matter. So if you eliminate that from the equation, you're then basically saying, and I don't think his aerial ability, it's not high enough for him to be a huge factor. It matters though, that's the thing, I'm not going to hide from it. It matters, this aerial ability. We care about this 2-point swing significantly. Just not, I don't think we care as much about a 2-point swing in aerial ability as what we care about a 1-point swing in speed. Let's put it that way. And then outside of that, we're talking about losing 1 in finishing, which we do care about a bit about because he does get some of those shots. We do care about the passing because he does a lot of passes, so that matters quite a bit. And the 1 point in crossing matters to us. I think the crossing and the finishing, maybe the crossing is a little bit more, but it's close. If you're saying what would you rather have, basically 1 extra point. On this side, you're saying it's 1 extra point if we ignore the speed, aerial ability thing, and we ignore the long shots. If we say it's 1 extra point in crossing on this side, and 1 extra point in passing, versus 1 point in finishing. Like, absolutely, we care more about the crossing than the passing. And then up here, we're saying basically 2 points in aerial ability on this side, or 1 point in passing. And like, I think for sure we care more about the passing. So then the question is, what do we care more about? What do we care more about? The 1 point extra in speed versus that trade-off? It's close. To be honest, this is ridiculously close. Because it's like the 2 point swing in aerial ability matters, and the extra point in the passing matters, and the extra point in the crossing matters. And you're giving all of that up to get what is effectively like 1 extra point, not losing 1 point if you want to look at that, 1 point in finishing and speed. And then also, whilst I don't care kind of about the long shots at all, because he very, very rarely takes them, like he does occasionally take them, so it's not like this 3 points is completely without meaning, although it's 3 points total on this would be worth less than the 1 in finishing, let's put it that way. It's close. I'm going to go on this side. It's super close. That's all I can really say. Like, the speed is important for this player in particular. So, but that's the thing. It's like, it isn't, it's 1 point in speed. 1 point in speed and 1 point in finishing. Or 2 points in aerial ability, 1 point in crossing, 3 points in long shots, and 1 point in passing. Such a close one. But I think we're going to go with this side. The aerial ability, his aerial ability is high enough that he will be involved in the set pieces. So he, even though he won't necessarily win a lot of them and whatnot, like it is going to be high enough that it is higher than a lot of fullbacks for him to win the duels. Like, the aerial ability matters. He's not so low that he's unlikely to ever win this stuff anyway. It's high enough that he's not going to be one of the very best on the pitch, but he's quite often going to be able to win whatever matchup he happens to be against. So it's enough that it matters, and I think that's the kicker here. Why it's this side is probably the right answer, by the way, is because of how high his aerial ability already is. If his aerial ability was like 27 or something at the moment, probably the correct answer is end up the other one, because that extra couple of points is much less likely to ever make a difference. Either way, that player is now nerfed enough that he's going to be materially less useful. On the basis of that, say materially, but like a little bit noticeably, like it's going to matter basically. That boost for us, or training option. It's an interesting dynamic because they're kind of not, when their players get older, they're not necessarily boosts, right? They're like nerfs. Right, this guy. What are we talking about? 1 extra in movement or 3 in determination. I think it's just this one. I mean, we don't this guy isn't really around much or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, it's just this one because the movement just doesn't really matter at all because he's a centre half. Right. I know this guy. He's the starting squad AMC that we're not a huge rush to get rid of. We might end up selling one of the other AMCs if we get a bid. He's not the best backup. Like, he's not the best or whatever, but yeah. I think now, certainly with 4 less speed, when it was already kind of like, it's not the most important thing for this guy, but it's yeah, it's not great that he's 4 slower. He's certainly going to be a worse player after this round. The marking, not that big a deal. The movement matters even more if he's slower. The positioning, not that big a deal. The crossing and the finishing, we don't care that much about the crossing. We do care about the finishing. We do care about the aerial ability. We don't particularly care about the marking. I think it's this side. It's pretty close. To be honest, it doesn't matter too much, because I think once he's lost his 4 speed, we're just not going to use this guy. So we might as well just pick what's likely to impact his value the least. I think that'll be this side. Pretty close, but I think it'll end up being this side by a little bit. Right, this is our big striker that we care a lot about. At the end of the day, his primary strength comes from his speed, and giving it a bit more is probably just what we need to do. It's great that he gets some extra endurance, because he is tiring, even if it was this side, because he's starting as well. The natural fitness would, the +1 and 3, and he's probably still not quite as good as the +5 endurance, but it would be not a lot behind, let's say. So either option is viable in regards to the player tiring, I think. But the +4 speed, combined also with the 1 extra positioning, which doesn't really matter, but it's like combined with the fact that it's not worse. You know, you're effectively saying, what would you rather have? 4 endurance, 3 speed, and a positioning versus 3 natural fitness. I mean, it's obviously this side. But it's great for us that he's now become an even better, it's going to take a next step up, basically, with that boost. This guy I think we're just never using. So we're just going to pick whatever the one that's got the most stuff that makes sense. It's this one anyway. This guy, I think we're just going to pick this side. Losing the endurance and the flare, not ideal, but he gets an extra control and extra finishing, which is fine. And he doesn't lose the speed. So I think that's fine. I mean, arguably, you know, he's even a little bit, he's quite old there or whatever, but not that old, but he's, I think, arguably a better player after that boost, for sure. I think this is our super slow striker, who was 15 speed, but he got +5 on his last training option. So he's still super slow, but yeah, got a lot of points here still. Positioning, marking, endurance, agility. So I think it's just this side. Get the extra long shots, basically. Bit of extra agility. Yet another player we just not really. I think he's had a couple. Nope, not even any off the bench. To be honest, this guy might end up being a thing. At DMC at the moment hasn't been injured at any point. If he does, this guy probably ends up on the bench and probably ends up playing a bit. So we do care a little bit about this guy, what we pick. He's likely to come off the bench if he does, so the endurance isn't that big a deal. The vision matters. So we're effectively talking about 1 point in agility versus all this other extra stuff. This other extra stuff is definitely better. And then this guy, he's one of those players we keep talking about who is in our starting squad. He's not starting, but we're happy to have him around for however long as a backup. Whenever he does play, he's always the box-to-box. So the tackling matters a bit, the passing matters a bit, the determination, not that bothered about at this point, and the composure not that bothered about, and the endurance matters. So would you rather have one extra passing or one extra tackling? That's a genuine question. And then the 2 less endurance. I think in the end it's this side. I think because he's a box-to-box, the endurance matters here. And then I think if you ignore that endurance, I think the rest of it is very close. I think we're equally as happy to take the one, like effectively, you know, take 1 less point in passing, but have 1 extra point in tackling. Basically, I think that's very, very close. I think this is close. So all of the rest of this together is extremely, extremely close. So I think the 2 endurance pushes it into the favour, especially when that matters for that. And then this guy, he's slow, and we do use him a little bit. He has had some games in the senior team. So when he plays, he's the attacking midfielder, typically. It's what he would normally be. So we care about long shots, passing vision, primarily. He's not great for the box-to-box because he's so slow and his tackling's not that good anyway. So, bearing that in mind, vision, the marking doesn't get back that much. Determination, speed. So we're talking about 5 points in flair versus 2 in finishing and 1 in dribbling. Now he's pretty slow when he's dribbling, so there is a lot of scope for the other team to catch up and tackle him. His flair's super low anyway. And the finishing's pretty low anyway. The dribbling's pretty low anyway. The marking doesn't really matter at all for this guy. It's pretty interesting because it looks like there's a lot of points here, but not really much that actually matters at the end of the day. The vision matters, but that's the same on both sides. So we're saying 1 in determination, and that does matter a little bit because he is young, so the extra training points or whatever matters. It matters a little bit. So that matters. So 1 in determination, 1 in dribbling and 2 in finishing. 1 drib, 2 finishing, 1-1-2. Versus 3 marking, 5 flair. I think 5 is just such a bigger number. I think it's this side though. I think just this dribbling and finishing just helps that a little bit more than what this extra flair does, basically. And then you also get the extra determination. I think this is very close though, to be honest. Generally, if I'm mulling about it for ages like that, though, it's because it is a very close decision. So, right, this guy, he's our guy that can tackle and nothing else. He's about to go from slow to super slow. And his aerial ability is about to get completely wrecked. Like, this guy's about to become really bad in 7 days' time. So we need to be on the lookout for another central defender. I think this guy's probably not going to be making the grade next season, because I mean at this age he's just going to get worse and worse after every boost, and he's going to be wrecked enough that he's just going to be left with only his tackling pretty much, and if that goes down then that'll be for sure the end of him. How do we reduce I think this one, unfortunately, just neither's great. Ideally not losing that extra 2 aerial ability, but the thing is, for a centre-half anyway, he's outmatched here generally anyway for the aerial. Going back to that other guy, because if his aerial ability was higher, then this would matter more, the fact that he's losing it, but I think it's low enough that it doesn't particularly matter. So I think in the end we're basically just left here with, like, there's only so slow this guy can get before he's never going to be able to catch up to anyone to tackle. And we just need to try to... I think that's the factor here. I think, the dribbling don't matter too much. I mean, he's not really dribbling anywhere with it anyway because he's so slow. I think it all just comes down to that point here. And if his aerial ability was high enough that he was contesting those aerial duels, then instead it would be this side, because you would care about that as well, and that would definitely make this side better. So I think that's where that's at. Now we're going to look at our academy trialists. So hopefully this will be faster, because let's see though. Hopefully no tough choices here. So endurance, not brilliant but good enough. Tackling doesn't really matter. 3. Tackling come out 55. Awesome. We're waiting on the speed now. It may have already been the case from yesterday for this guy, but we're waiting on the speed. If the speed comes out really good here, then this guy is kind of awesome, even if the aerial ability isn't that great. So yeah, this guy's potential here. potential to be so good. So there's big scope for disappointment, basically. This guy, movement, doesn't really matter. Finishing doesn't really matter, but it's 54. Parrying matters, which is what we're waiting for on this guy, and that's come out at 60. So that's awesome. So now I think we're just a case of like waiting for this guy to go through stuff here. We will want a starting keeper for our youth team. So the determination unfortunately matters a lot because of he will be playing every single match. So we'll be getting like, the lower determination, just potential, like we could get a worse keeper with high determination and he will develop better. And like thinking longer term, if we're going to be starting a 16-year-old keeper in our youth team, we absolutely want the possibility and to some degree the intention that that guy will become good enough to one day be the starting keeper in our first team. So the determination is going to help a lot with that. But it's not far off. It's B, so we'll find that out soon. Right, this centre half too long to find out the tackling. Don't use right winger. Got to wait ages to find out the speed and the determination. So I think on that basis, the speed isn't particularly like as important. The thing is though, like, it definitely varies in regards to how important it is for different positions and roles and stuff, but there isn't any sort of outfield role, position, anything where speed is basically the least important attribute. It's somewhere like varying between near the top and in the mid-range. I think for our MCs, it's closer to the mid-range, but it's a factor. We would find the passing out next, and then the aerial ability. And a really high aerial ability for an MC for us could compensate for lower speed in regards to their usefulness. But the thing is, we've only got 2 central midfield roles, and one of them is box to box. So one of them for sure doesn't need lightning fast, but needs fast enough. The other one a bit less important. But I think ideally going forwards, that AMC, we need them to be more than just a player that has long shots and can pass the ball. I think ideally they need to be a threat to burst in the box, take players on the dribble and stuff. So I think ideally we would want high dribbling, high strength and high speed and stuff as well. So I think on that basis, no good. This guy, too low tackling. Don't know too many key things. They are coming up, but the vision's already low. So he can only be the box to box, and then the speed's just 13. It's just not enough. This guy, tackling speed too far away. Tackling too low for box to box. Long shots too low for attacking midfielder role. Too long to find out the shot stopping. Too long to find out the tackling. Tackling too low. Long shots too low for attacking midfielder role. Too long to find out the tackling. Too long to find out the tackling. Too long to find out the tackling. Vision already low, probably eliminated as the AMC role. The attacking midfielder, attacking midfielder role in central midfielder, and the tackling too far away, the passing too far away, already not that fast. So yeah, no good. Don't use a left winger, and don't use a right back. So we would need these ones that we don't use need to be awesome basically in order to justify retraining them. I think this guy, whilst looking decent all round, the tackling already pretty low. So I think not as good as the right back that we're going with at the moment, who we know basically that we would have to retrain at some point if we went with him. He's got really good stuff, 57 marking, 55 tackling, 55 speed. So basically nothing there. And lucky because there's nothing we're really interested in taking on, and that's quite lucky because like we didn't really have any reveals here that resulted in us wanting to just get rid of any of these guys. So that's it. Daily Loop, and we'll catch you on the next video.